Hi guys, today we're going to be making these little ornaments, or you could just leave it as the wreath itself if you'd like to use it for something else. I actually turned mine into little ornaments. So on this one here, I had some hooks that I believe I got from Michael's, but I think you can find them pretty much anywhere this time of year. They're just little ornament hooks, so I attached that at the top. And on this one, I just used a little loop of yarn, which I do show you in the video how I did that. But you can use whatever you'd like or leave it just as the wreath itself. And you can see on this one I did a little bit of a smaller bow, and on this one I did a bigger bow. But during the video when I'm showing that part, you can make it however you like it. So I think they turned out super cute. In regards to the materials, I'll just get these out of the way. The yarn that I used is this Craft Smart Value yarn, and this one here is in the color white, but I use 3 different colors, as you can see. And you can use any color combinations that you would like. You can do it all in one color. You could use 2 different colors, whatever you would like to do. So this one here is white. I also used it in the color bright red, the same brand of yarn, and in the color ivy, which is the green color. And it's just a worsted 4-weight acrylic yarn, but any 4-weight acrylic yarn will work just fine. Other than that, you'll also need a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook. If you would like a bigger wreath, I recommend using a larger hook. And if you would like a smaller wreath, I recommend using a smaller hook. But I thought that the size that this 3.75 millimeter crochet hook worked out perfectly. You're also going to need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle to sew in all of your ends. But other than that, it was a super quick and easy project. So I hope you guys enjoy making it, and we'll get into the tutorial. All right, to get started, we're going to start with our first color, and we're going to start with a slip knot on our hook. And I'm going to chain 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm going to slip stitch to that first chain that we made. So without twisting your chain, we're going to slip stitch to that very first chain we created. So put your hook through that chain and pull the yarn both through that chain and through the loop on your hook. And I'm going to chain 3, which counts as our first double crochet. And for round 1, we want 2 double crochets into every single chain all the way around. So that chain 3 counted as our first double crochet. We're going to go back into that same stitch that we slip stitched into with our second double crochet. And then we will move to that next chain and we will do 2 double crochets into it. There's 1 and 2. Moving to the next chain, 2 double crochets into it. And that's the pattern for round 1. It's just 2 double crochets into every single chain around, and at the end of this round, you should have 20 double crochets, and that includes that chain 3 that we started with. That counts as a double crochet. So when I've made my way around and I'm back to over here, I will come back on and we'll go on to round 2. Right, I've made my way around and I have just one final stitch here to put 2 double crochets into it. And at this point, you should have 20 double crochets around, and that includes that chain 3 that we did at the very beginning. So if you're a little bit confused about where that final stitch goes into, just count your stitches and make sure you have 20 double crochets around. And at this point, we're going to slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. And I'm actually going to fasten off at this point to switch to my second color. If you'd like to switch to your second color in whichever way you know how to do, that's completely fine. I like to fasten off completely when switching my colors. So I chain 1, cut my yarn, and pull that yarn through and pull tight. And then I'm going to bring in my second color here, which is this white. And I'm going to attach it to that same stitch that I just slip stitched to and fastened off. So I'll put my hook through that stitch, wrap that yarn around my hook, and pull it through that stitch, pulling up a loop, and chain 1. And if you pull on that white tail, that'll tighten up that chain. And we have our second color attached. So I just did 1 chain. I want to do a second chain. So it'll be a chain of 2. And then I'm going to front post double crochet around this first stitch, which again is that chain 3 that we started with in the previous row. So to front post double crochet, we wrap the yarn around your hook and bring your hook down, going into the stitch from the right, and then bringing your hook up to the left of that stitch. So the post is on top of your hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through those remaining 2 loops. And that's a front post double crochet. And we're going to chain 1. And then on the very next stitch, we're going to do a front post double crochet. So again, we yarn over the hook, go in from the right of that stitch, coming up to the left of it, so the post is on top of your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through those remaining 2 loops. And again, we're going to chain 1. And that's the pattern for this entire round. We front post double crochet in the very next stitch, chain 1, front post double crochet around the very next post, chain 1, front post double crochet around the next stitch, and chain 1. And I'm just going to repeat this all the way around, and when I've made my way back to where I started, I will come back on. All right, I have 1 post remaining here. I just did my chain 1. I will front post double crochet around that post. And don't forget to do your final chain 1 here to finish up that round. And at this point, you should have 30 stitches around, and that includes those chain 1s in between the front post double crochets. So again, we're going to slip stitch to that first front post double crochet that we made. Like so. And we're not going to do anything else into that stitch. In the very next chain space, we're going to do 3 double crochets. So going right into that chain space, we'll do 1 double crochet, a second double crochet, and a third double crochet all into that same chain space. And then we're going to skip that next front post double crochet, skip the next chain space, and into the next front post double crochet, we're going to slip stitch. And again, into the very next chain space, we're going to do 3 double crochets into it. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And we skip that next stitch, skip that next chain space, and into that next front post double crochet, we slip stitch. And that is the pattern all the way around. So into the very next chain space after your slip stitch, we do 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. And then we skip 2 stitches, so skip that next front post double crochet, skip that next chain space, and into that next front post double crochet, we slip stitch. And we just keep repeating that around. 3 double crochets into that next chain space, skip the next stitch, skip the next chain space, slip stitch into the next stitch. In the very next chain space, we do 3 double crochets, skip the next front post double crochet, skip the next chain space, and slip stitch. And I'm just going to keep repeating that all the way around. And when I've made my way back to this side, I'll come back on. All right, I just completed my final set of 3 double crochets into that chain space. And you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of these little shells, I guess we could call them, which is those 3 double crochets into the chain space. And you should have that next stitch to skip, and then the final chain space to skip, and then we're back to where we started. So I'm actually going to slip stitch right into that beginning slip stitch there. So there's the chain space, and I'm just going to go right into that next little stitch there and slip stitch. And then I'm going to slip stitch into that first double crochet of that very first shell that we made, just to make it look a little bit cleaner. Oops. I will slip stitch into that as well. And then I'm going to fasten off. So I'm going to chain 1, cut my yarn, and pull that yarn through and pull tight. And we're all fastened off, and we have the main portion of the wreath complete here. So at this point, we're going to work on the little bow and the strand of yarn that will kind of weave around these stitches. So you want to bring in whatever color you'd like to use for that. So I have my red yarn here, and I want to look at my wreath and just pick which way I'd like it to sit. I think it all looks pretty similar. So where I fastened off, I'll just leave that as the top. And starting in that first obvious space that's kind of right below there, but anyone will do depending which way you're looking at it, I'm going to put my hook through there. Oh, first, I forgot to mention that you're going to need a strand of yarn here that's probably about 2 feet in length or so. So I had already pre-cut that from my red yarn. So you want to go ahead and do that. And now back to over on the wreath, we have our hook through. Looking at the right side of our project, I just put my hook directly through that space. I'm going to grab this yarn here and just pull up a strand. You can use your yarn needle for this. I'm just using my hook to kind of weave it in and out, but you do whatever is easiest for you. And I'm going to leave probably about 3 inches there just to be safe to tie a bow once we're done. So we'll do the same on this side when we finish up. I'll also leave a tail and we will tie a bow there, but we don't need to worry about that right now. So I have my yarn there. Then I'm going to go into the very next opening again from the front to the back and pull that yarn all the way through this time. So holding on to this tail just to make sure we don't lose it, I'm going to pull that yarn all the way through. And then coming from the back to the front on that next obvious opening, so you can see it looks like there's a set of 2 double crochets there with the obvious space on either side. So there's the 2 space, 2 space. We're just working through those obvious spaces. So we're not going between those 2 in the small space. I'm jumping to that next bigger space and putting my hook from the back to the front this time, and I will pull that yarn through. This may actually be easier with a yarn needle, but I have my hook right here. So, and I will pull that all the way through. And all we're doing is just weaving it in and out of those spaces. Again, jumping to the next obvious space, but this time from front to back, grabbing that yarn, pulling it all the way through. And on the next one, from the back to the front, pulling that yarn through. And I'm just going to keep working my way all the way around, weaving this yarn in and out of these obvious spaces. And when I make my way back to that final obvious space, I will come back on and show you how I finish it up. Right, I'm at my final obvious space there, and I will pull that final strand of yarn through, and you can see I have more than enough. But that's okay. You can kind of tug on the other one if you want to get them a little more even, but it really does not matter at this point because I left more than enough of a tail to do half the bow to start. So, in fact, I will just cut a little bit of this so they're closer in length. There we go. And at this point, I'm just going to tie a bow, just like you would do on your shoelaces. And I don't pull too tight here, but I do give it a little tug. And then just finish your tying your bow just like normal. And then if you pull on each of the tails, you can get it where the loop is the size that you would like. So I like it a smaller little amount. There we go. And I will wiggle that bow in the direction where it wants to sit naturally. There we go. Give it an extra little tug. Make sure it's all sitting how I like it. Perfect. And then I'm just going to snip the tails, leaving as much length as I think works for my size bow, but you go ahead and make them as long as you would like. And you could always use a little bit of glue to push that bow down, but I think it looks quite nice like that. And I think that's everything for the wreath. And at this point, I'm going to get all of my tails sewn in. And at that point, I'll show you how I turn this into an ornament. All right, if you'd like to make this into an ornament, just bring in whatever color you'd like to use for the part that will hang on your tree. And I'm just going to cut a strand, again, making it a little bigger to start. That I know will give me more than enough room that when I tie it and have a loop, that loop will be big enough. So I'm just going to pick a stitch right at the top. Doesn't matter what stitch, I'll just go into that last stitch that I slip stitched into, and I'm going to pull half that yarn through that stitch. Like so. And I will make sure both of the ends are even here. That's pretty good. And then at the end here, I'm just going to tie a knot with both of those strands. Starting further down, just because I can always maneuver this knot to make that loop a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to kind of push that knot where I would like it to sit. So probably somewhere right here. Just kind of maneuvering it until it's sitting where I would like it to sit. There we go. Perfect. Make sure it's all tight, and then you can cut as much of these tails off as you'd like. You can even go right down to the knot. I'm going to go just a little bit above it. My scissors aren't very sharp. There we go. And you have a way to hang your ornament. So you could also put a hook in here if you have one. I also have, I will just grab one here, these hooks that I got from Michael's for ornaments. So if you have one of these, in fact, I kind of prefer to use these, but I would have just stuck it through that same stitch, and then if you just pinch on that end, it will close it up tight, and you have just a simple hook to use to hang on your tree. So that's how that would look. So I actually kind of prefer it doing this way. I probably will get rid of this strand, but if you don't have that, that's completely fine. You can just make a little loop out of yarn to hang on your tree. And I think that's everything, and I hope you guys are happy with how your little wreath ornament worked out. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!